Okay, we're going. We're live.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kathy. So welcome everybody to the Administration and Finance Subcommittee meeting of the Health Connector. And looks like we have a full and robust agenda today. So welcome all the staff and members of the committee and the mystical people who are out on YouTube, if anyone is watching. So Carrie, I think you're going to take the lead on walking us through, but Audrey, anyone else have anything they want to say other than I hope everyone's summer's off to a good start?
That's exactly what I would say, Nancy. Thank you for chairing. No additional comments for me, just a thanks to everybody for joining and all the work behind the meeting today.
Thank you, Nancy. I believe you may need to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Okay. Well, so we need to approve the minutes from the prior meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Wave your hand, shout something. Looks like okay.
Aye.
All right.
And I'll do a roll call for that.
Oh, do we have to do roll call? Because we're on. All right, Kathy, then.
I think it would be safe.
All right. We'll be safe.
Okay. Nancy.
Yes.
Dimitri.
Yes.
Bella.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Having officially done that, then.
Okay. I assume
this is a financial update.
That's right. We have some financial updates for everyone. I'm assuming everyone can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Overview. I'll start. It'll be Edith and I presenting. And the purpose of today's meeting is to review updated FY24 financial projections and share with the subcommittee the FY25 budget recommendation. The administrative budget will be voted on by the board at the July board meeting. So welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Since we last met in January, the most significant update since that meeting has extremely favorable implications for the Commonwealth and the Connector Care program. Edith will, of course, discuss in subsequent slides, but in April, CMS approved federal financial participation for the Connector Care expansion population, which significantly reduces the net costs of the Connector Care program. So that's very great news, and we're very thankful to CMS and our federal colleagues for their consideration. From an administrative budget perspective, not a ton of news or change. We've only accounted for modest updates since our last meeting in January. FY24 changes are negligible, and in FY25, we do continue to account for any budget impacts that may result because of the procurements for contact center and technology services. These are currently out on combis. Once we get bids in, we will of course review in more detail, and we will update the budget accordingly in advance of the July board meeting. So I'll stop there. And if there's no questions, I can turn it over to Edith, and we'll start with FY24.
I have a quick question, which is the projections are looking a lot better from a few months ago when we first saw the numbers. Is that with the introduction of the additional funding from CMS for the Connector Care program?
Yes, Dimitri, I assume you're referring to the cost of the Connector Care program, and yes, Edith will discuss, but primarily that favorable variance from a net perspective is due to the additional FFP on the expansion population.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dimitri, there are a few other moving pieces, although as Carrie said, that's the major one. So I think as we walk through this, that pieces of it will become clearer too.
Okay.
And I'll pass it to Edith.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So we're nearing the end of FY24, so no major area of uncertainty at this point. So the big change for FY24 is, as Carrie mentioned, the approval from CMS for the FFP for the Connector Care extension. which we'll see on the next slide, what it gives in terms of results. So as you can see on this slide, the Connected Care program is now projected to cost 41.8 million for FY24, which is 17.4 million lower than the most recent numbers shared at the last subcommittee meeting. The main drivers of this variance are the approval of FFP on the Connected Care expansion. So that's more than 9 million out of this 17 million. And also some state CSR reconciliation restatements.
Yes, could you say just a bit more about the CSR restatements from the prior year?
Yeah, so we started to do some audit on the CSR files that carrier are sending us every year at the end of, or about almost 6 months after the end of every year, they send us a claim file. And we do a reconciliation because we send them some advance payment during the year, and at the end of the year, we reconcile actual claims against those advance payment. And in 2020, we started to do some audit of those claims. Basically, the money that came back is as a result of those audit. So there was, a carrier, especially, that was kind of behind on fixing some issues that were found during the audit. So that's why we're seeing those amounts.
And so it's a bigger adjustment than if we looked at a few of the prior years, but we think going forward that carriers got better systems in place, so we won't see such a big adjustment.
Yeah, at this point, I think most of the issues have been fixed, so that should go better, in the years to come.
And maintaining the audit, the reconciliations moving forward, correct, Edith?
Say that again?
With regard to reconciling the advance payments with the carriers, which we're doing on an annual basis, that's something that we're continuing moving forward.
Yes.
Is there a potential value in maybe increasing the frequency of that as opposed to annually?
Yeah, it's annually because we receive the claims file from the carriers annually. It's just once a year. So they send us the claims for the whole calendar year after the year closes, basically.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, carry on, Edith.
Okay. So that's projected enrollment. So enrollment is tracking closely to what was projected last January. Membership is now expected to be 0.4% less, mostly due to lower enrollment for the unsubsidized population. But you can see like the brown line, it's what was projected last January. And then the bars are what we're projecting now. So you can see it's pretty close.
Edith, can you remind me on the Connector Care expansion population? Is that 300 to 500?
Yes.
Is there any way, are we able to track 3 to 4 and 4 to 5?
Yeah, we're tracking them. I mean, on this exhibit, we split it
Okay.
The 0 to 300 and 300 to 500. But yeah, internally, we do have the split.
Do you know roughly what that split is, or?
Oh my God, I think it's like 72 for 300 to 400 and I don't know, 72, 73 and then about 27 for the 400 to 500 if my memory serves me right, but I can check.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bella, we can follow up with the specifics, but also just for your awareness, as your curiosity, I'm sure, is shared by others in terms of the numbers and the split and what carriers people are in. We're preparing a report that we're hoping to be able to share probably by like late June, early July, that has a pretty comprehensive analysis of everything going on inside of the pilot so far. So more to come there as well.
Great.
And then Audrey, in terms of where we landed after redetermination and everything I think the last we heard was some good news that potentially overall coverage had actually gone up by the end of the period. Is that holding out, and do we have anything updated on that?
We don't have any new numbers since I think we last talked about that, Nancy, but preliminary data from the Division of Insurance does show an uptick in overall coverage in the state through, and I know Marissa's on, I think it was like the first quarter of 2024. I think there's still pieces of that we need to kind of parse out and understand in terms of, Mass Health levels and different types of coverage inside of Mass Health, but there's definitely directionally favorable indicators in some of the latest data that we're seeing from DOI. And then I think there'll be a longer tail on more affirmative data through CHIA with its surveys, et cetera. But we can tie more of that information up for the board in terms of all the places we're looking to sort of tell the story of what the state ended up looking like post redeterminations from a coverage perspective. But the short answer is it looks positive, particularly relative to what I think we were braced for in terms of risks of coverage loss here.
Yeah, great. All right, well, I'll await with bated breath some final numbers, but that's encouraging initial results. So
thank you.
Happy to move on to the administrative budget if there's no further questions here.
Great.
Okay. So this is our FY24 administrative budget. Slide 7 provides a high-level overview. Let me just please quickly review the exhibit with you in case folks have forgotten. So at the top, you see the projected member months, followed by our revenue, and then our expense line items. We're comparing current projections, of course, to those that we shared back with this subcommittee in January. This is followed by two different views of our net position and reserves, one with and one without our GASB adjustments. And there is more detail on the next slide, but for us, these adjustments are mostly due to GASB 51, and that reflects the one-time purchase of an intangible asset that's depreciated over its useful life. In our case, these are the implementation costs associated with our contact center and premium billing vendor. And these costs were, of course, they occurred back in 2020 and 2021. That view is consistent with our financial statements. However, in the middle, we do show the view without the GASB adjustments. We think that this provides a clearer view of our current net position, given, again, that the spending occurred a couple of years ago. This view also, we think, helps provide additional context to our CCTF request for the year. So current projections are very similar to the estimates that were shared in January. We have a net revenue decrease coupled with lower projected expenditures, which we'll see more detail on the next slide. And with respect to the revenue, the decrease in the carrier fee is due to lower per member per month costs, and then, of course, slightly lower enrollment that Edith already discussed. Our net at the very bottom here, our net position remains unfavorable at a negative 9.5, which is of course expected. And our reserves are estimated to be around 53.5 or so million by June 30.
And Carrie, just remind us that's well above the reserve position continues to be strong relative to what?
Yes, the auditors
recommends.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you. The auditors have historically and consistently recommended that we maintain 6 months or so worth of operating reserves. So I feel very good. I think others do too. I think we're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, great.
So if no further questions here, the next slide provides some detail on our expenditures. And the only line item that I would really highlight here is for navigators and outreach and education. There is a favorable variance here, but this is nothing to be alarmed about because of the historic nature of this redetermination period. we budgeted very conservatively, had a very healthy budget for this area of work. And as it turns out, there were contingency funds that we did not spend. And so that's why you see the favorable variance here for the navigators and for the outreach.
Any questions about this?
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
great.
Now we will transition into FY25 and I'll pass it back to Edith.
So we still have some uncertainties regarding membership, more specifically on the number of individuals with DACA status that will enroll in a QHP. So these people will become eligible for subsidies starting on November 1st of this year per recent federal rulemaking. Although the Medicaid unwinding has been completed, some flexibility granted by CMS to MassHealth last year will expire in June, which should result in more movement than usual from MassHealth to the connector. But the exact number is hard to estimate at this point.
And Edith, could you or someone remind us in terms of the Dreamers, like about how many people we think are potentially eligible for subsidy?
Well, that's really hard to know. I mean, we had some people that did come to the connector for other reason. We just found out they were dreamers. This year we've seen less. I think last year we had about 3,000 or 4,000. This year I think we're totally maybe less than 1,000. But those are just people that happen to come to the HIC system. I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that we don't really know. Those that will come to the connector, those that already have some employer-sponsored coverage. So really hard to estimate.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's in the range of several thousand, maybe, but difficult to know.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think we'd seen a number that there was an estimate that there's about 5,500 DACA recipients in Massachusetts, but that's of course silent to whether they would be, interested in coverage, need, all of those pieces. But I think that would be the ceiling. So probably thinking about it as a couple thousand, a few thousand probably is right. Maybe a bit liberal in estimating, but
yeah. Great, thanks.
So the more generous ACA advanced premium tax credit subsidies of the IRA continue into 2025, but this could be the last year. Premium smoothing continues into 2025 for enrollees with income up to 300% of FPL. The connector care expansion population does not receive premium smoothing subsidies. In the budget presented today, it is assumed that in order to be eligible for the second tier of premium smoothing, the rate difference with the lowest cost carrier must be equal or less than $250. Which is a reduction from the current amount of $375. However, the final amount could be different. It is subject to a vote by the board of directors. Federal poverty level is increasing by 3.3% for a family of one, which is lower than what we saw over the prior 2 years. That was 7.3% and 5.5%. Increases in enrollee contribution for connector care are tied to this index. And given the high inflation of the past 2 years, enrollee contribution increases have been dampened, but we didn't assume any catch up for plan year 2025. So the current assumption is that the enrollee contributions for the lowest cost plan will increase by 3.3%. CSR loaded rates are assumed to continue for plan year 2025.
Can we go back and review the premium smoothing bullet about from 375 to 250?
Yeah.
So can you remind me, so that basically previously the maximum rate difference between the lowest cost and the highest cost was allowed to be 375.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that rate difference is the actual premium difference, or is it the member premium difference?
Yeah, it's the member premium difference and it's based on
okay.
an average. Because, yeah.
Okay, so it's not, that 375 is an average and the 250 is an average, but it could be, the rate difference could vary.
Well, yeah, by average, I mean, when we determine which carrier will be eligible for the
Yes.
subsidies, we're assuming, for example, we take, all the actual rates from all the carriers, but we're gonna assume like an average age, by area, for example, that will be applied to all carriers. So that's what I mean by average.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that 250 we haven't finalized that number yet.
No, it's just based on the latest discussion that happened, but it could change. And there's actually, if people were decided to, or if the board was deciding to go back to 375, there is some conservatism in the assumption right now for premium wrap that would allow to do that.
Okay.
Marissa, it may be helpful for you to just chime in on kind of where we are with our thinking and like the timeline for development of our final recommendation for 2024, just so Bella and team have a sense of where those conversations will occur and the opportunities to shape that if we do want to go in a different direction for plan year 2025.
Absolutely, happy to. So we had discussed kind of prior to the launch of the 2025 seal of approval, and based on the discussions last fall with regard to 2024 and the 375 limit that we'd set, kind of tamping down that upper end based on the board's feedback, and so had proposed as part of our February discussion to reduce that cap to 250 to kind of signal that the connector was interested in additional cost containment and really sharpening pencils with regard to where we put those premium smoothing dollars. But the 250 I think is a signal for sure, but if there's a particular amount that makes more sense in the context of additional discussions ongoing with the board, we can make those adjustments as needed. So I know we'll have some further thinking about 2025 premium smoothing, 2026 and beyond, different approaches that we could take that would be consistent with the policy goals of the board. So we can have some of that discussion with our seal of approval work group, and then we'll be back in front of the full board in July.
And of course, the conversation gets to move from theoretical to practical once we have those rates. And again, as Marissa noted, the 250 is more of a signal and a marker put in the seal of approval. But once we have final rates, we can actually determine what it would mean in terms of the particulars with respect to individual carriers in different regions, et cetera.
Yeah, and also what the financial implication is once we see the rates. It's hard to. I mean, we can do, I'm sure, an order of magnitude, but
exactly.
So we'll have conversations informed by actual data.
Yes,
Pretty
exactly.
soon. But as you all are saying, there's no decision made on this until there's an actual proposal and a board vote, Bella. So lots of time, and well, maybe not that much time, but room to weigh in once we see the actual rates.
That's right.
And then Audrey and everyone, there's obviously uncertainty about some things we have control over, but a lot of uncertainty, including an election coming up. So assume you all are already well underway of doing other planning of different scenarios and what the potential implications would be, particularly of any changes in the federal policy environment. A number of which are embedded in the assumptions.
Yes, that is exactly right. So we are undergoing analyses about different implications of different election outcomes, which isn't, of course, just about the White House, but control of Congress. So, for better or worse, the Commonwealth has been down this road in terms of learning about all of the different ways that there are levers to affect the policy space that we are situated within. So that work is ongoing, and that's something we plan to talk with the board about likely this summer. just to give you a sense of the array of situations we could face and how we would react to them, where we have levers for control at a state level, where we have less, just for our own situational awareness. And there are policy implications for that, as well as financial, certainly with respect to the continuation of subsidies or other ways that, you know, policy making could curtail the flow of federal dollars into the state in different ways.
Okay. With that looming ahead, should we push on?
So for FY25, the net of FFP, the cost of the collector care program are estimated to be $223 million, which is 64 million lower than the number projected in January. 56.4 million of this variance is attributable to the approval of FFP on the collector care expansion pilot. Lower premium in 2024 is resulting in lower state CSR costs. And there's also a higher proportion of lower income people with higher federal subsidies and lower state subsidies that are contributing to the difference. Any question on this one? If not, we can.
No, we
move
should
to the-
say a collective thank you to the federal government.
Yes.
You have the slide, I think.
Yes.
It's really, really good news. And I'm sure it took a lot of hard work on the part of a lot of people to make the argument. So congratulations. It's great.
Thank you. And I just have to give credit to Mass Health, because they really, you know, they stuck their neck out on this request and did a lot of the legwork to get it done. And of course, the federal partners that made it possible. But it was.
And
took
thank
them
you,
for
Dan
sure.
Tsai, too.
Thank you, Dan
So,
Tsai. 100%.
Projected enrollment for FY25 is slightly lower than what was projected in January, primarily due to the lower enrollment for the unsubsidized population, but it's very close. Since we're very close for FY24, then it's rolling forward to FY25. So no big changes. Any questions?
No, I kind of observed this in the pre-meeting I was able to have, but the accuracy of our projections, you know, really, I think bears some note, and compliments to Edith and Carrie and everybody else who's been involved in this. I mean, in an area where, you know, projections are very, very difficult, I think this is really impressive.
Thank you, Nancy. Kudos to Edith as well.
Yes, you're here.
Yeah.
Ditto.
If no questions, would you like to proceed to administrative budget?
Any questions? Yes, then please proceed.
Thank you, Nancy. So again, slide 13 here is a high level overview of our current FY25 recommended budget, and we compare those estimates to the ones shared in January. As I mentioned on the overview slide, I think the significant thing here to point out is that we continue to account for any potential budget impacts that would arise because of the contact center and technology services procurements. The assumptions here haven't changed since January, but as a reminder, based on prior and historical experience, we've reserved 10 million for implementation costs for these vendors, and another 8 million for kind of operating costs if there is a scenario in which we would need to have multiple vendors operating concurrently. We will know more in the coming weeks and months, and of course, we will continue to update this budget accordingly. And so based on these assumptions, FY25 reflects a negligible revenue increase, and we do have expense increases of about $2.5 million. And this is resulting in an unfavorable net position. However, we're still projecting reserves to be extremely adequate at 48 million. And if there's no questions, there's a couple of expense items that I would highlight for the board on the next slide. Hearing none. So 2 lines here, contact center enrollment and premium processing. We do see a $1.2 million increase compared to January. This accounts for some potential increases for our vendors that could arise as we are in the middle of some contract amendment negotiations. So we should know more here in the coming weeks. And of course, we will adjust accordingly for the July board meeting. And secondly, we are reflecting additional expenses for our vendor for our Health Connector for Business program. We've been informed of some additional costs for information technology and some security enhancements that they would like to perform. These costs are allocated based on the cost of our instance or our code-based technology. But those two items represent the $1.2 million increase for contact center. I'll stop there before I go to the second item to see if there's any questions. Hearing none.
Dimitri, did you have a question?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Thank you. Sorry, I can't see everyone. And then the second item that I would just point out for personnel and fringe, this accounts for about 5 new positions across multiple departments. It also accounts for the full year cost of the new positions hired in FY24, cost of living adjustments, and the employee benefits that are associated with those positions. And of the 5 new positions that we are budgeting for, most of those are to support some of the work that could potentially come in-house as a result of the procurements that are currently out on the street as of now. And the expectation going forward is that hopefully after the procurement, we will have a more favorable pricing structure, and that will offset the cost of these positions if they are eventually needed. I'll stop there and see if there's other questions or any other commentary from others. Okay, hearing none. That would conclude the slides on the administrative budget. There's one last slide, just a quick update on our FY24 financial audit. We have started to plan for this upcoming audit. This will be the last audit under our current contract with KPMG, our current auditor. So we will need to do a procurement in advance of the fiscal year 25 audit. The schedule is that the field work will occur during July and August. A draft of the audit report will be completed by October 1st and submitted to this subcommittee and the comptroller. And the final report will be submitted by October 15th.
And then Kara, what's the timeline for the re-procurement? So we finalize that and then we go, do we go forward with re-procurement, or is it happening at the same time?
We have not started with procurement activities. In fact, Dom and Stacy and I were just talking about this last week. I think we would like to do this late summer into early fall, Nancy, because our current contract ends on December 31st. So we want to make sure that we have a contract in place with, an auditor for January 1st.
Yeah. And do we always do a 4-year term? Has that been the policy?
That's a great question. I'd have to go back and get that information for you. I think in some years there's been I think prior to that, maybe we had a 3-year engagement. So I can go back and find that answer for you, Nancy.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I'm more familiar with 3-year terms, but
Okay.
It was our policy, our practice, a state requirement. So
Let me find that out for you.
How long have we been with our current vendor?
We have had KPMG since 2006, Dimitri.
Okay.
so basically since the connector was formed.
The inception, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But
So I was gonna say I've never sat through an audit report where it's been someone other than KPMG. So
Yeah, and we've had other bidders for sure. We go through our audit or procurement process, and they've come out on the end. So we'll see what we get this year.
Great. Any questions about the audit or the conversation we started about the procurement?
I just had a quick question. If someone can remind me what the 5 new positions were, that would be very helpful.
Yes, I can do that. So there were 3 positions in IT to potentially that might be needed to support this technology vendor in-house. The other position was a director of data and analytics. I think we talked about it at a prior board meeting. There's a new program. We're enhancing our data and analytics and reporting services. And the 5th was a compliance position. Dimitri, does that help?
Very much so. Thank you.
Barry, what's our compliance staffing now? Do we have a specific compliance
We have-
person? who's
We have
essentially-
2. This will be the
Okay,
second one.
it'll be the
Yes.
second one. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Sorry, Audrey, were you going to say something?
Nope, I was just gonna answer that. Yeah, we've had one person on compliance, and just based on observations, it's an area I think we could stand to deepen, just in terms of being more proactive and forward-looking in terms of shoring up, areas of programmatic exposure for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, probably most organizations that's true of. This gets much more complicated and fraud and an area of exposure. So,
Yes.
Dimitri, did that give you what you need?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Going. All right, so I think that was our agenda, at least as I recall it. Anything else on anyone's mind, or Audrey, Carrie, anyone else? So
Nope. I'll see you
we
in
need
July.
no votes other than the one I missed at the beginning. I claim continuing jet lag from my vacation, but thank you, Kathy, for correcting that. So, well, as I said, excellent, really good news about the additional match, very impressive projections, uncertain political environment, but yeah, we thank you for all of your work. Excellent presentation. So
Great.
we
Thank
just
you.
need to vote to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay. Kathy, you gonna do a roll call?
Of course. All right,
Okay,
Nancy,
thank you. Yes.
Dimitri,
Yes.
Bella,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, so that's a wrap, and everybody enjoy the sun if it comes back out, the rain if it does not, and we'll see everybody soon at a Health Connector board meeting, I think.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Great
Everyone.
afternoon.
Okay,
Bye.
take care. Okay, bye.
Bye.